Welcome to BWI Live. Thomas Frank Carr and Sean Fitz with you today. Ryan Snyder has some family obligations, so we're going to be here talking about recruiting and Penn State football preview of the weekend, and of course reviewing last night. If you've come to like the rhythm of the week, we got the same thing on tap for you today, as we always do. Minus maybe a little bit of recruiting with Ryan. You know, we're not going to have our games of the week to preview. We're not going to have some of those things that are his specialty, but we still have a lot of great information and content and conversation for you over the next 60 minutes of airtime here on the internet. Fitz, welcome to the show. How you doing today? How have you been recovering since the I want to say bluster of news yesterday at practice and all the things that we went through?
Yeah, bluster might be a little bit overstated. It's been it was a quieter, not a quieter practice because they pumped in the music. James Franklin mentioned afterwards that they're trying to do more defensively, specifically with loud sounds, and it was louder. And for Villanova week, I thought the energy was pretty good. We saw some coaches getting into it, not getting into it with each other, but like keeping guys on the ball. And that's what you need this time of year, especially with the bye week on the back end of this. You know, the FCS team, then a bye week is not exactly, the most get up for it. But if you have to be told to get up for it, that's an issue. But Penn State's team looked okay yesterday at practice in terms of the avalanche of information. We talked to James Franklin afterwards. We can do an impromptu between the lines, but it's it's a midweek before Villanova kind of field.
Yeah, for sure. Before we get into this, and I hope I'm not springing something on you here. If so,
Never.
Sorry. Like just as a whole, we're going to talk about the whiteout and the bye week coming up because I think that's really the major focus of what fans want to know. But what's your temperature on the visits for this weekend in general? Like bad, good, great, middle of the road. How would you describe kind of the weekend that is? Because we're not really going to cover that later in the show.
Not great, but I mean, you've got an FCS opponent coming to town in September. Guys are getting their season started and things like that. And we've seen throughout the last couple of weeks some guys falling off the visitor list for the last minute. Keemon Spell was one last week that we expected him to come up, and then all of a sudden he's got an ankle injury. That stuff happens. I mean, I'm not too worried about throwing that one in there, but no, I think it's it's a smaller visitor list. The 3:30 kick helps. I mean, FIU was kind of diluted because of the noon kick, and then you get the weather, and it's just kind of everybody felt the same way about last weekend, and you put that behind you. They did offer Javian Robinson, Spell's teammate, wide receiver from McKeesport. That's an interesting one. I don't know if we talked too much about that one. He's an in-state kid, ranked really highly. It's just interesting to follow because you look at Javian Robinson and he's got 4 stars beside his name and didn't have a Penn State offer to his name, even though he camped this summer. I think it's one of those things. I think we got ahead of our skis a little bit when rating, taking a look at what he brings to the table. And of course, physically looks good, but I think he's just got some development to go in terms of what's ahead of him. So we'll continue to watch that as Penn State continues to stress the importance of Pennsylvania, stress the importance of how that matters now, because you've got a situation here where you're in a new era, the NIL era and everything like that. But you also have, there's a lot that goes into being an in-state kid and maximizing the potential of earnings from an in-state school. And I think you look across the country at different schools. And I think somebody put out a graphic about the average distance from the campus of their class of 2026. And I think this was in the SEC. And it was much smaller than you're used to. Of course, you've got some outliers there because you're going to get Florida guys going to Boston College and things of that nature. But you look at Penn State's class and it's not really, spread throughout the, other than Ireland, it's not really spread throughout the map. And I think that's an interesting thing as we continue to get further along in this revenue sharing, as we continue to get further along into the NIL era. I think it's becoming more centralized. So, and I think this is probably good for Bill Belichick at UNC. Like North Carolina's a good football state if you can keep those guys home. And we've seen a lot of government movement to help out in-state schools, and that continues to be a process in Pennsylvania. But I think Penn State has sort of leaned on that a little bit more. And plus, those guys tend to stay when they commit, when they get to campus, they tend to stay. So I think that's an interesting sort of subplot in this little 5-year window of what we're looking at right here, that the things are maybe becoming a little bit more regional than they have been in the last 15 years.
That's fascinating, given I would have expected the exact opposite when it comes to NIL and how all of this would be working. Just clean up
Now,
a couple
well,
things.
you're going to have outliers. I mean, you're going to have Texas Tech throwing money. You're going to
Sure,
have Oregon.
sure.
You're going to have outliers. USC all over the place, going to New Jersey and getting Luke Way. You've got these not exceptions, but you've got these situations where they happen. But on the whole, I think your dollars are well spent. I mean, look at how this works with tuition, in-state tuition, things like that. Like there's things at play there. So I think it's just an interesting sort of microscope on things. Maybe it doesn't need to be looked at that closely, but Penn has emphasized the home state, not just for the dominate the state, best in PA, stay in PA, all that kind of stuff, but because they want to keep those guys here. And I think that they need to continue to do a good job of explaining why it's a mutually beneficial relationship. You look at Penn State's roster right now, ton of PA kids that have been really successful, Saquon and so on. So I just think it's a fascinating look at how that all works, especially with the way that the population demographics have changed football in Pennsylvania. High school football in Pennsylvania is not what it used to be, but you can still find some great players.
Yeah, for sure. Just a couple things for the podcast audience who didn't get to see the graphic. Javian Robinson, Keemon Spell's teammate, a 4-star receiver for Rivals, 102 for 247. He is a 3-star and 89 overall, but in the on 300 for Rivals as well. So that there. And then one last thing, we're going to be getting into our Penn State practice update and highlights here in just a second. But as always, like the video, subscribe here to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. And by the way, if you're scrolling through YouTube and maybe you've watched the full show, we, throughout the week, put up select portions of the show as standalone videos for people that haven't watched the full thing. Or I know that I do this of like, I look at something, I'm interested in it, I see the runtime is an hour, and I'm like, ooh, I don't got time for that. So if you do watch the full show and maybe you want to support the channel, you can go into those videos and you can hype them and like them, all those things. You can hype 3 videos a week. I found this out last week. I want to shout out to the people that helped me kind of discover these things because it's a really new thing. And so I did look at these things. Our subscribers watch all the stuff we do, but I totally get it. You don't want to watch 17 minutes of a video that you already saw. If you want to share it with your friends, hype it up, any of those things, super appreciated. Normally we just give you the general things, but if I have a specific request direction thing that will very much help us out in this large ecosystem and big pond that we call YouTube. With all of that, let's get into what you're here for. Penn State practice up.
You gotta win, goddamn you! You gotta win! Get to the corner!
That might be the most interesting and exciting part of our Penn State practice updates. I shouldn't say that. There was some good stuff yesterday. I think the internet is still hyping up what we saw from Chaz Coleman, Fitz. So you were over there with the one-on-ones. I was with the receivers because if I'm going to get video, I don't want to be shooting through players. But looked like there's some interesting things on the defensive side of the field. So why don't you take us there and start us off?
Chaz Coleman, man. Yeah, you just keep going back to it, and you feel that it's not a matter of time because he's already kind of broken out, but like you're looking at the special things that he can do. It's like I think he's going to be a good player. And 2 games into his career, is that a given? Which is crazy to say, of course, but the things that he does are special. Last night, he set up Drew Shelton and knocked him on his backside. Like that is a starting left tackle that's been starting for a couple of years, a good player. And a freshman comes in and hey, balances everything when you're an offensive lineman, when you're in your pass set. But at the same time, seeing a true freshman charging over a senior is there's something to that there. So everybody keeps asking me if he's going to take 11 from LeVar Arrington II. That's a really interesting dynamic here. I don't give any thought to it, but it's just a funny thing when you look at how dominant he's been in the short time that we've seen him, and you don't see too many players like this. So continuing to see Chaz Coleman on that rocket ship that he's on right now is quite fun. I think it's been a really interesting ride from, hey, I was at camp this summer and he's huge. Like he stands out as a true freshman. He looks skinny out there in pads. We knew he would. Every true freshman defensive end that's come through has been that guy. But at the same time, I was talking to one of his coaches from Warren Harding, and I'm like, hey, this guy, he's something, right? He's like, well, he's got to learn to work his hands, and then maybe we'll see what happens. He's pretty raw, and that's coming from guys that coached him, and then all of a sudden he gets to campus, and Penn State coaches are like, oh my. Wow. Okay. Yeah. We'll work on his hands. That's fine. We'll take that. And everything else seems to be great. And it's just to get someone that explosive, on as a senior riser evaluation job. I think that's pretty incredible, especially given that Ohio State did come through with an offer and Penn State was able to fight them off. I think that's a incredibly, incredibly positive thing for Penn State. Yeah. And you're continuing to look at this and say, okay, well, the defensive line for the next couple of years, they can all stay together. They can all stay healthy. Of course, Max Granville's on the shelf this year. If they can do that, man, they're going to continue to do some special things. So,
can I jump in here?
What's that?
Just quick. Can I jump in about Chaz Coleman and his hand usage and some of the things that I've noticed through the first 2 weeks. You mentioned what he did to Drew Shelton. The idea that a freshman would have the awareness to use a bull rush and not only use it, but use it effectively against a senior. When we say there's an innate sort of thing, it almost discredits his ability to learn quickly, because like certain things here, are like he took them directly from basketball and then used them as pass rusher, even if they're not perfectly adapted from one to the other. And then there's stuff he's clearly learned in the last couple of weeks. And it is very impressive to see a guy using multiple moves in a game against, in live fire, not just in practice. And he did this against FIU. Like he had a bull rush that got a pressure. He had a spin move that got a pressure. The way he's winning, the diversity of his moves, I think that is really impressive, because you see guys go through their career and not really diversify their skill set. They try to be really good at one or two things. And we're seeing him out there trying stuff. And not only is he trying it, it's working. It's fascinating.
He used a spin move on a punt rush. Now, I'm not saying that that's like, something that I would suggest, because it takes a while to spin and everything like that. Yeah. But I don't want to say he almost got there, but he got closer than he should have for using a spin move on a punt rush. So that's pretty incredible to watch that. Deion Barnes said a couple of weeks ago about Coleman that you've got a guy that is making corrections on his own and doing it and putting it into play. This was back in camp. And that's pretty unbelievable for a true freshman. I don't know if we talked about it on the show before. I feel like I've said this before, but just it's pretty unbelievable when you've got a guy that messes up, and then I think Deion was on the other sideline. The guy comes back and does a different thing. He makes the self-correction and goes with it and makes the play on the very next play or 2 plays later, whatever it was that Deion was saying. And that's pretty unbelievable. And that's the kind of stuff when you're talking about going beyond blowing up FIU to projecting the next couple of years and what that could mean for him. That's a pretty ringing endorsement for Chaz Coleman. So I'm going to continue to watch this weekend and be excited about that. Be excited about seeing Jalen Harvey continue to get better. I thought his week one jump his jump from week 1 to week 2 also very notable. Like I think that's the building that you want to see, because you want to have 4, maybe 5 or 6 guys that are ready to go at defensive end. You know what you're going to get from Denai. You like what you got from Zariah Fisher. Coleman's obviously the talk of everything. But yeah, those 3 through 6 guys, they need to continue to sort of fortify that position more so than anything. I think you're seeing that at defensive tackle as well. So pleased with the defensive line in terms of their progress. Still plenty of questions, because you're playing who you're going to play or who they've played so far. And I think that's really kind of going to take some of that shine away. But I think some of the stuff they've done as they continue to learn the defense, as they continue to sort of, free up linebackers and have those linebackers learn behind them, because I think that's going to be an absolutely huge thing in 2 weeks is how those linebackers read and react really. And I think that's it's encouraging there. Interesting note from practice last night when I talk about self-correcting. Terry Smith lit into Davian Collins for messing up a drill, and apparently he messed it up I guess 2 days ago now as well, and it wasn't corrected. So you're seeing some of that harder coaching and things like that even in this week. I think that's a positive thing. So those are a couple of takeaways from practice. Again, not the most interesting of times. I did think Zane Durant, he I don't want to say equally as impressive in terms of the rep that Chaz Coleman had, because it's tough to match that. But Zane Durant was in the backfield as Venga Iwane got out of his stance. And that wasn't like a criticism of Venga, but Zane Durant's very quick. And watching the first couple of games, and I know you talked about this on the board yesterday, watching his first couple of games, he doesn't have the stats that you think that he would get, but he's still been an impact player for Penn State, even beyond the interception.
Yeah, and part of that is that teams are throwing the ball so quickly against Penn State, and so when they are up by a big lead, the starters come out. So some of those obvious passing situations, the starters aren't necessarily getting the opportunity to get those. It's just interesting, like how all of that has played out this year. On the offense, was there anything else from the defense? Talk about some of the things we saw from the offense.
No, I mean, you're looking at Xavier Gilliam has the best stat line, I think, of any of the defensive tackles right now. So it just kind of gives you an idea of what's going on with those guys. And I White's right up there. He's playing more than I thought he would, just based off of the feedback we got, mostly when he was at defensive end. I think he's found a home in there, and that's important, not just for this year, but for next year as well. So as they continue to try to fortify in there, I still have questions about that group as a whole in terms of how fast they're going to have to grow up to play Oregon, but you're not going to figure that out until 2 weeks from now. So other than that, I got nothing.
Yeah. On the offensive side of the ball, this is a conversation Fitz and I had last week where it's like, okay, Egan Boyer is back. He looks pretty good. Like, he's still not wearing his own number. And for comparison, Owen Alicini is wearing his own number in the 2 deep, but also did not play at the end of the game. So there is a little bit of mix and match when it comes to what we're seeing at practice and what actually manifests itself in the games, but looked better this week than it did last week. So it is interesting, Fitz, that they did not play Alicini last week. They clearly want to save his red shirt. Garrett Sexton played at left tackle on the final drive where they put in the second string with Javen Williams over at the right tackle side. Javen was with the scout team, didn't see him with the full team when he was working with. He has gone back and forth a little bit between being with that top group and then being in the scout team area. So using those tackles, who's available, and in a game like this, I believe it's going to matter that they're going to get down to some of those guys in reserve. If Egan Boyer is healthy, I think it'd be great for him and great for Penn State to get some of those left tackle numbers back up, because clearly you don't want a freshman to be one of the guys that's next up. And not that it would be a linear depth chart like that, but just generally looking at the offensive line and some of those things that are still recovering from having those 2 key reserves banged up this summer. Offensively, outside of that, there wasn't really anything different. The same group of receivers, minus a couple of guys. Some of the young guys weren't present at practice. Tight ends were all the same, going through the same drills. And then the running backs, Cam Wallace was back with the top 3 in that 3 running back competition with the second string. Again, it's interesting that I don't know if this is intentional, Fitz, but every time I feel like we get a beat on how the designations go in practice of like who's part of the 2 deep and who's on the developmental squad or who's going to be used for those looks in practice, switch things up. Now, Cam, none of the bottom 3 running backs in that group were wearing their numbers. And so it is very much like a scatter shot. I'm done trying to predict who's going to be available and who isn't going to be available based on what we see on Wednesdays, because clearly the rules have changed since last year. But that's kind of a tour of the offense.
And I'm wondering if during Oregon prep we see more regular numbers out there because it's so different than what they're preparing for in the first 3 weeks of the season. I think they've approached it differently. Some of that might be a detriment to how they've performed on Saturdays, but I think they've approached it differently. They've approached it with a purpose there. But yeah, you've got a couple of weeks ago with Quentin Martin in his number. That again, I think we've talked about this before. That tells me he probably put on a powder blue jersey with his own number after that. So seeing Javen Williams in his 74 on the scout team side, mostly with helmet in hand, still implies that he's still banged up. So I think that's something. And of course, his snap count as well. He's played some special teams. I think he's played 1 snap as an offensive lineman. Now you get Egan Boyer back into the mix, and you're probably continuing to sort of manage where he's at, because this is a guy they expected to play, and now all of a sudden TJ Shanahan's in there more. You're going to see more of you said Alicini in week 1, but also Garrett Sexton in week 2. So I think that those guys have benefited from this, but I think you got to give Boyer some snaps if he's ready to go. We thought he was going to be ready to go last week. He ended up on the injured list as out, but he was the second team left tackle yesterday, and as you said, doing more than, it's a gradual pace to build that up. And he seemed to be doing more than we're used to seeing in the last couple of weeks. I can't wait to see him. I think he's, got a ton of potential, but also he needs to play. He needs reps. Yeah. And this is the time to get it. He's not going to get in the game, or he's not going to get those reps that he needs against Oregon or a lot of teams on the Big Ten schedule. So I think this is the time for Egan Boyer. I can't wait to see what he's bringing to the table.
Yeah, and it's encouraging. Nevada late in the game, I think the offensive line played pretty well. Like some of those young guys, Sexton and Alicini, looked strong. Ryan mentioned it after that game, and I think it's fair to point out. Love to see some more similar data points from Egan Boyer, if possible, here to end the non-conference season. That is your Penn State practice update. Of course, for more, go to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com and check out Fitz's recap of practice and our notes and observations, which you can find on the Blue White Illustrated message board. Join us for $1. You know the spiel, and then you'll get instant access to all the things we have coming up on game day, including film analysis, first impressions, all that stuff here from Penn State, from our Penn State football coverage. This show is brought to you by Andy Ludicky and My Perfect Franchise. Things always move in business, but one thing is for sure: a good business and a bad business. If you look at them, do you know the difference of where you want to put your money, where you want to invest? Maybe if you have expertise, you do. But maybe you don't. And Andy at mypickfranchise.net this is what he does. He looks at businesses and he gives you the lay of the land if you have the money, skills, and expertise to invest in a franchise to then make your life different and better. That's all we all want, right? Is to live a better quality of life. And there is a reality of this, that the more money you have, the easier it is to live an easier and better quality of life. So if you want the next chapter of your work life, your career to be different, maybe you want to diversify, build wealth, or leave a legacy for your family, owning a franchise is something that can help. And by the way, Andy's services are 100% free. He's here to help if you have any questions about business ownership. He'll take you through not only the buying process of a franchise, but also the business side of it. What is it? How does it work? Is it a good idea for you specifically, given your skills, talents, and knowledge? And again, get on his schedule at andy@myperfectfranchise.net, or go over the Blue White Illustrated message board. He's been running a contest, I think, every month, where if you guess the franchise, he gives you a prompt and gives you some clues. If you guess the franchise, you get 6 months to the website, comped, because that you played along. So check that out. It's a super awesome deal, and he's a huge supporter of Blue White Illustrated. We love it when you guys support the businesses and the people that support us. Also here on the show, today's sponsor is Lusk Associate and Realty. And Ann Lusk is a legend in the York and Lancaster areas, and she is now here in Happy Valley. And we're here to tell you about that. Purchase of a home is a major life event, so why wouldn't you want one of the best? Not only in Pennsylvania, but in America. And that is a verifiable fact from what I was researching. You deserve the guidance of experienced professionals. Lusk & Associates Sotheby's International Realty is known for delivering world-class service backed by trusted names and commitment to excellence. And you might think, okay, so we're talking about like luxury homes or investment properties or whatever. Well, here I went to the site because I am so unbelievably nosy. I love looking inside other people's houses. Just check this one out. This one is on Butts Street here in State College. $279,000. I don't know if that's good or bad for you, but just look at it. I am an old school. I know that everyone might look at that and go, ooh, that looks old. Look at all this natural real wood. Fitz, I love that.
You won't be
doors
for that one. Yeah.
No, not at all. No, of course. Of course.
Fantastic.
Yes. And, you know, whether or not you're coming here, you want to buy a property so that your kids have a place to stay, that you have a place to stay during football weekends, or maybe you want to move to the area. A lot of people here retire here in State College to, live the second half of their life. And if you want expertise guided in that, you also want somebody who's a proud supporter of all things blue and white, like Ann. They're a knowledgeable team, detail-oriented agents. They have clients throughout Happy Valley and beyond. That's just one of the properties I showed you. They got a ton. Go to their website, put in the zip code, and then you'll find more. To connect with an agent, call 814-808-7588 or visit luskandassociates.com today. Lusk & Associates, Sotheby's International Realty, where experience meets excellence. Okay, let's get into the next thing here, Fitz. And it is not my love of real hardwood, real American hardwood, especially old growth hardwood like that house, which was probably built a couple hundred years ago. People want to know about what's going on with Villanova, recruiting, and what's coming up. So we touched on the Villanova list to start the show, but after this is a bye week. And Penn State usually is more aggressive on bye weeks with recruiting. We saw James Franklin at the State High game, by the way. I was at that game, checked out. Messiah Mickens didn't play, but Kevin Brown had an active night as both a run blocker and a defender. But on a bye week, coaches go out maybe a little farther afield. So what should Penn State fans expect from recruiting in general after this weekend? I think today's a good chance to kind of set up what's coming up in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, I'll preface this with every staff uses their bye week to recruit. This is not a situation where Penn State should be spending more time in the office poring over film. Every staff goes out, even if they have a big game the next week, and they're making the rounds to check on commits, to check on players and things like that. So Penn State's staff will be out on the road at the tail end of next week. It's not a situation where they leave on Monday and they're gone all week. They stay, they run practice. They get to Wednesday, Thursday. The GAs will run practice. The coordinators will run practice, and James Franklin will go out on the road and see some guys, evaluate some guys, I guess you call it now. That's kind of how it's going to work out. And then you head up to the whiteout. Ryan Snyder posted his list yesterday. It is extensive, very extensive. A lot of 27s and 28s, some of the best 27s and 28s in the country. This is a spectacle, and recruits are treating it as such. 5-star tackle Kennedy Brown's coming in from Texas. Elijah Haven, top-ranked quarterback in the country. He's going to be there. So you've got a really huge opportunity for Penn State. They're going to end up 150 to 200 recruits on the sidelines, and then they take them into the stands and have them watch a game. And it's your best recruiting tool. I firmly feel, it's your second best recruiting tool now, other than the potential offers that can come down the line for those guys. So you've got an opportunity to really show out, to sort of reestablish yourself on a national stage. I know Penn State's the number 2 team in the country, but if you look at the national conversation, not a lot of talk about Penn State. So It's very interesting to watch how that'll all come together. Guys coming in from all over. Of course, the night game helps. The fact that it's, against a very prominent opponent where some of these guys have overlap. I think that helps as well. So I can't wait to see what the final number ends up being. I tried to pull a few names just going down this list, but it's tough not to leave anybody out. I mean,
it was kind of overwhelming.
Yeah.
I was going to try and get some highlights, and I was just like, it's not going to happen.
I'm going to figure out a way to sort this by position, because that might be easier than sorting it by name, because you've got guys at every position that are coming up. So it's going to be an exciting time next weekend. It'll be great to have Ryan back for that, to talk a little bit more. But this is your one shot, your one opportunity to make that work. And probably a little bit early for 26 talk in terms of flip targets, but there are guys that they are working behind the scenes. And again, that's not going to be something that comes out until later next week. So keep an eye on the site. There's reasons they do that. They keep it from us. They try to keep it from us. They try to keep it from everybody. So
is that one of those things where, as you said, working behind the scenes, but if they release it too early or that gets out too early, then the team he's committed to can then make an aggressive push to get them stomp it out.
Yeah. And Penn State does the same thing. If they find out one of their guys is going elsewhere, they get on the phone right away with the coach. They get on the phone right away with the kid. They just try and just make that go away as fast as possible. Sometimes it's inevitable. Keemon Spell's got a wonderful list of games that he's going to check out this fall. But I think, again, that's one of the inevitable ones. But yeah, if you're going to this game as a 2026 committed to another school, and Penn State actually wants you, and there's a difference there. Penn State's got 25 commits in the class 2026, so that that changes some things for some guys. There will be some 26 guys that are committed elsewhere that just won't really get as much of the time of day. But it's nice to be there. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. I would look more toward October. If you remember last year, the UCLA game was really the one. With Bradley Gompers came, and Josh Johnson was there. A couple other guys were Brandon Finney came. There were a lot of guys that showed up, and that's a little bit. And I know it's only a week difference, but it's a little bit different when you're coming in October after you get a month of high school games and versus coming in for a big spectacle like this. Now it's probably easier to hide. Just off the top of my head, hey, Luke Wafel's probably going to be there. He's not going to be a recruit, but he's probably going to be there watching his brother. There's all these different things that go into it. It's going to be a fascinating list when all is said and done.
You mentioned October. Is this part of the maybe unfavorable part of the schedule where you do open up with? It's good for the football team to have this three game home slant 4-game homestand plus a bye. But then in October, you have one homecoming game versus Northwestern, and then you're on the road until November. From a recruiting standpoint, is that better with playoffs being over, or is the weather going to be a part of that when you have a game like Indiana in November 8th? I'm picking your brain about like how these dates work out from the perfect opportunity of like that October day where it's beautiful weather and guys can make it up, and you have that kind of marquee showcase event if it isn't the whiteout, one of those secondary strong games. Does it have to be in October, or is November also a workable date?
Well, it will matter if Penn State's or if these targets already took their official visit. So like if you have an official visit available and you want to make that work for Northwestern, which seems good right now in terms of like the prime, hey, the leaves are changing. Somebody keeps calling me. I'm sorry about that. Really need to figure out how to mute that on my computer because that's ringing for some reason. But you're looking at October 11th against Northwestern. That's an opportunity right there. And it's easier to spend time with those kids for games like that. No disrespect to Northwestern, but it is very different, the time and opportunities that these coaches have to spend with these players as opposed to an Oregon game. So now you can come in a little bit earlier against Oregon, maybe get some face time earlier in the day, but they just keep going back to prepping for the Ducks, which is the right thing to do.
Yep. B6 here in the chat. Wow. Thank you very much for a $50 donation. He says, love you guys. Thank you for years of great content. Want to let me know yesterday's podcast was not up. I checked. This is one of those things where you think you did something and then suddenly you look over and it didn't go through. So that has been corrected. You should have yesterday's podcast very quickly. And the good news is you got a 2-for-1. If you're driving up for the game this weekend, you can just save them for the weekend anyway. But you'll have 2 podcasts today for the price of 1 because yesterday's podcast went out at about 10:20 when I saw that message from B-Stick. So once again, thanks for the support. Thanks for the note. Anytime stuff like that happens, feel free to let me know. There's a lot we're juggling here, so always appreciate an assist. Fitz, something in the chat you wanted to get to?
I think there's some good questions, and I don't say that lightly sometimes. Further up in there, there was one about Drew running the ball. From Christian.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Christian says, T-Frank Fitz, do we think Drew is refusing to keep it on the zone read because of the opponents, or is he just not reading it right? Feels like the element has to be there to beat Oregon or Ohio State. Number one, the last sentence, incredibly true. He needs to run the ball against those teams. If you look at what he's done over the first 2 weeks, he ran 8 times against Nevada. And James Franklin came out on Monday afterwards and was like, hey, you're taking too many shots. Don't do that. And he didn't do that against FIU. And I think that was on purpose. I'm going to say that. I mean, you hate to say, hey, they're telling me not to run. But if you look at that 4th and 2, that Katron got stuffed, pretty clear the zone read was, hey, there's Katron. I'm going to read and give it to him. But because he was not keeping that ball. He had 2 rushes against FIU. Both were sacks. Did not scramble much. Did not do much from that aspect. And I think it's pretty clear that Penn State's approach was, don't get hurt. Don't do something stupid. And I think that matters. And I think that, yes, would you like to see him practice it in a game like that could get him better for Oregon, could get him better for Ohio State? Absolutely. And he will have to run. And he's run against those teams before. He's run against both of those teams. So I think it's going to be part of it moving forward. But in the non-con, I think it's very clear that they're trying to keep him safe. And I think that's the right call, even though it's a little bit to the detriment of the running game. Yeah.
And to be clear, it is always difficult, Fitz, because 4 of those runs were scrambles against Nevada. Mm-hmm. And then I think he did keep 1 in that situation. It's interesting, the point of the read option. And by the way, going through the B gap, it's dangerous no matter what you do when you go through the B gap, which was what he would have done on that particular read option. They were not reading the end defender. And it was also complicated by the fact that there was an RPO on the backside. RPO, read option, 2 separate things. That the point of the read option is to mitigate the risk to the quarterback when running, but there is still risk. And I absolutely, as you said, I think if there's one thing that they are holding back from a precautionary standpoint and not necessarily from we got to save this for Oregon because they want to put everything on film so you have to prepare for everything, it is that run game. It is that part of the run game, that element where even Fitz, we haven't seen anybody other than Katron Allen line up under center. They have not I don't know if there is a package where they have a Wildcat quarterback or a option quarterback that isn't Drew Aller, So is that part of the offense this year? Is that not part of the offense this year? I think that remains a mystery. I tend to think it's got to be more Drew this year, but we'll see. And it's something that I think, as you pointed out, you don't really need to do against FIU or against Villanova. So probably not something we're going to see today, but that is a great transition. You want something else, or can we get into
it's actually another great transition to another good question from our guy, Beach Wine Guy. I mentioned that Franklin's game plan the past 2 weeks has been to work on weaknesses. Do you think they will continue this against Nova or put it all together once before Oregon? Boy, you're going to hate this answer. I think they're going to continue to do what they've been trying to do, and that's work on the things, especially, and T. Frank asked this last night, against a different looking front, against a different looking defense. You got a 3-3 stack coming to town against Nova, and that's going to be a bit different, and that's going to be helpful, because what has Penn State's biggest challenge been on the offensive line? It's not just been being mean and nasty and pushing guys out of the way. It's been getting to the second level and opening some holes for those guys in the second level. Specifically, Katron has been an effective runner so far, and he's doing it with less space. So I think that's the big thing that I look to. I don't think it's as much about the rotations. I don't think it's as much about, because you look at last week, I think Cooper Cousins played 8 snaps and TJ Shanahan played 15. So it's not like a situation where you were just like saying, okay, we're going to rotate lines and get different outlooks. But I think it's more about just kind of to feel it out. James Franklin said on Monday about the lack of live sessions in camp. I think that's a timing thing. Like that is something that you have a tough time when you're trying to keep everybody off the ground, when you're trying to keep everybody from getting hurt. You don't block like that in the game. You don't block like that with a guy on your shoulder to realize what the time is to release that first block and get to the second level. And right now, Penn State's not doing it well. I think that's the criticism. Again, offensive line has been better than you think it has been. But at the same time, there's still some things to work on. And a lot of that is getting to the next level.
Yeah. And that's another great transition to get us into our conversation about Penn State Villanova, so that we can give people a sense of what we think is going to happen this weekend. As usual, this is going to be a focus on the Nittany Lions, but having watched the Villanova defense both in 2021 and, of course, against Colgate, I think there's some interesting things. One of the reasons I asked James Franklin about that last night, asking about the odd front run defense, is that it presents challenges to this particular zone scheme, because that's odd fronts present challenges to zone schemes. You can still work through that. There are ways that Penn State mitigates those things, but it is, I think, interesting that they've had these teams that have these multiple looks, and Villanova specifically runs this 3-3 stack, which can be confusing and difficult, given that Oregon runs a hybrid front. They do similar things. Ohio State has shifted to having 3 down looks in their defense. So this is something that is a direct application of a learning experience based on what the opponent does and the look that they give you. So I guess that's my opening salvo into this conversation of what I'm interested in this weekend and how Penn State can take something out of this, given it's an FCS team and everybody is kind of disrespecting the conversation around the opponent and what they bring to the table. What are you interested in so far in your view of this game and what you're interested in Penn State working on, offense, defense, or what you've seen from Villanova?
How much they do and how much of it can be a confidence builder, because you look at the vault that they can have coming out of Villanova into Oregon, and that comes by, sort of grounding those guys and getting Nick Singleton some confidence, getting Drew Aller some confidence, making some throws and getting in the rhythm. And it's more of the same of what we saw in the first couple of weeks. You're going to challenge them and do things that they're not very good at for a purpose. And like I'm saying here in the chat to Eggman, like it's not about exposing the weakness of what they're doing in the scheme. If they realize they can't do something against these teams, they're not going to do it against Oregon. They're not going to do it against Ohio State.
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of personnel groupings. There's a lot of formations and things like that are on tape for the first couple of weeks that we might not see again, just because they're working on things that they're not very good at. And I think that's part of the whole. You can't evaluate this team after 2 weeks based on what we've seen. Like that, I'm seeing things like that. You're missing this, and this is a failure. And I don't think that's the point, right? You're not looking at the down to down. You're looking at the game to game, month to month more so. And I think that that's where the potential is in this team. Big picture. And a lot of the fans are not going to see the big picture. I'm not completely seeing the big picture either when it's Saturday and it's 10-0 against Florida International.
Sure.
But I think it's part of a process here. And I don't think that they're bad. Like they're number 2 team in the country for a reason. They've got a lot of talent and they're going to have to show it. And they're going to get an opportunity to show it in a couple of weeks. But I think that taking this team through the first 2 weeks as face value of what they are, I think that's a bit misguided.
Yeah, it's so the funny thing is, Fitz, we have this conversation about they're not playing anybody. That was the conversation in August. And this is a perception thing over a football thing. They're not beating up on these teams that the number 2 team in the country you would expect to romp by 60 points, put up a 70-0 against Oklahoma State like Oregon because of the context you've added here. But nobody else cares about that context. So if they go through the non-conference and they don't look particularly strong, then they go to Oregon, and let's just say they lose that game, close or not, then it's like, oh, this team's a fraud. Obviously, this team's a fraud. They haven't looked good all year, and they're struggling against Oregon. They struggled against Villanova. Why would we think they would be good against Oregon? And that context doesn't matter. So Penn State fans, I think what they want, it's the idea of winning the battle instead of looking at the long picture of what is the war we are waging, meaning how do we become as good as possible at the right time, peaking, all those things in football. I don't know if does that matter, like, to you, the perception of that, of what it might turn into?
Well, first off, I think there's no real correlation between out of conference schedule performance and eventual performance. Michigan in 2023 showed that, right? Like, in Ohio State last year to an extent showed that as well. Although they did have the big test early with Oregon. I think that's out of conference scheduling, whatever. If you have a test that early in September, it's going to matter. Which I think is about this weekend or next weekend. I forget when it was last year. But I hate doing war equivalencies, right. But you do have to win a lot of the battles to win the war. And that's kind of, I think that's the frustrating part right now is You're losing some of those battles or you're neutral in some of those battles. And it's a tough time seeing the outcome of how that's going to look in first off, September 27th and then November 2nd, I think it is. So you've got to get there faster. So like last weekend, you saw a different team or different approach, I thought, in the second half than you did in the first half, right?
Yep.
But also, for as much success as they had moving the football in the second half, a lot easier than the first half, they also didn't finish some of those drives still. So like that is the thing that you have to get over that hump and not just assume that those wins are going to happen. So when you're talking about getting the battles against Villanova, and I thought that this is something they did actually decently well against Nevada, it's getting those eventual points. Like against Nevada, you got 3 instead of 7. That's one thing. Against FIU, you didn't get 3. Like that is kind of the frustration there. And I absolutely get that. So they have to win more of those battles. They have to win more of those, hey, go out there and take it, make a play type stuff. And that's overgeneralizing. That's right in line with the nasty offensive line comment that I made earlier. Kind of things that don't exist. Nate would call them the Remember the Titans things. He was so proud of himself for that. If you watch the show on Tuesday, we were golfing yesterday and he brought it up like 3 times. He's like, left side, strong side, whatever BS is going to come out of there. But no, I think it's one of those things when you're talking about the process rather than the outcome, because the outcome on September 13th, it does not have an effect on what it's going to be on September 27th.
Yeah, and to the point here of, to just put a button on all of these things, Stephen Keel says losing battle to win it all. As much as, it does make me cringe as well to use those war metaphors, they still won these games. And I was first off the boat to say, like, hey, a 34-0 win that was 20-0 with 3 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever it was, left in the fourth quarter, doesn't feel like that was a good win. And there were some struggles in there, and there are maybe some concerns as to how that game played out. But they still won the game. If we're looking at the big picture of if they're working on these things, I guess what are the few things left on your checklist for them to work on, offense or defense? We've talked a lot about the offense being this the case. They gave up a lot of yards and some 13-play drives over the last 2 games. So offense or defense, what do you think there is left to work on for Penn State that they can get done in this game to sharpen themselves and not going back to more weapon metaphors? Cleaner later.
Cleaner situational football. Third down is going to be absolutely massive for them moving forward. Probably not as much against Villanova because you're looking at down and distance and things like that. But you're looking at a team that needs to be able to throw the ball on 3rd and 7. And I don't see that right now. And I think that that's concerning.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, to me, the defense, looking at where they are in those situational, turning a good play into a better play. Because James Franklin talked about the communication, but generally, I think the communication is not a pre-snap thing, although we did discuss that yesterday with Franklin and the headsets and all that stuff.
T-Frank, I do have a correction. Sure. Ohio State played Oregon on October 12th last year. I don't know why. I thought that was in September, and I would have lost it in my head, so I had to rudely interrupt you. So
that's fair. Absolutely. I mean, how many times have I done that here on the show? The defense, to me, like the execution of the play is more about, can you do it faster? And Franklin has mentioned this, where I think there are times you see guys make a play where they get a tackle and the guy falls forward for 4 yards. It's just about tightening these things up so it's not 3rd and 3 or 3rd and 4, and you can either put yourself in a 4th down situation to go for it, or you put yourself in a situation to convert on 3rd down. This defense has the capability of being less bend but don't break and just doesn't bend if they play their assignments correctly and if they're in the right gap at the right time. Some of those things are mental. I don't see as many physical errors of guys just losing off the ball in the front 7 or in the secondary. So one of the battles I think that I'm interested in, Fitz, I wrote about this yesterday, is the safety battle. I think there are still positional competitions going on. We discussed running back 3 last night with Franklin after practice. But to me, the safety battle is super interesting because there's been a lot of mixing and matching, not just at that position where Antoine Belgrave-Shorter is the starter, and then the other guys have gone after him, but also as Zakee Wheatley's backup. I think that's also an interesting and underrated battle that's going on, which is also shaping the number of snaps that guys are getting in the game, because if you're playing behind Wheatley, he's not coming off the field as much in that rotation. Do you think that there's going to be a final stanza in this and then we see that tighten up? Or do you think it's going to be 4 guys rotating throughout the secondary throughout the year?
I think it's absolutely going to tighten up in the fact that Zakee's going to play 70 snaps against Ohio State, Oregon, or whatever. And then you kind of feel out from there. I don't think there's finality there. You thought Antoine Belgrave-Shorter coming in with the momentum that he had from camp would be able to grab it. And I think he's done okay. He played a ton of snaps against Nevada, got that scaled back, and the other 2 guys played a ton of snaps against FIU. So I still don't think that they're there. I still think in terms of when you're looking at potential worry spots on that defense, safety is really hard to play. And when you don't have, in the Knowles defense, safety is really hard to play. And when you don't have the experience, last year they had Reed and Wheatley and Winston until he got hurt. If you don't have that experience, might come back and bite you. So I think that that's one thing that they just have to grind those guys, especially this week, or they have been in the last couple of weeks, drill them out and get them in there. Same thing with linebacker. Someone mentioned in the chat, they've only got 3 linebackers that they trust. And I think that's it's another thing that's going to come back and be a question for this team is how does that work? Like we thought after week 1, Keon Wiley, I thought played a pretty good game. Then we didn't see as much of him last week. And I think that we saw against FIU they came out with the intention of playing a lot of guys once again. And when things did not go to script, they tightened up in the second half. They played fewer guys, both sides of the ball. They played fewer guys. And I think that's more indicative of what you're going to see against Oregon is 4 receivers instead of 6 with Tyseer Denmark and Kobe Howard, or 6 or 7 offensive linemen as opposed to 9 offensive linemen like they played in week 1. So like there's definitely different opportunities there, but safety and linebacker, the 2 hardest positions to learn in that group, it's definitely still a question mark in my mind. As are the corners, but for a different reason. The corners just haven't been
I was going to ask you about this.
Yeah, the corners just haven't been tested, and that's nothing that they can do. When they've been called upon, they've been fine. But they've watched the nickel get attacked. They've watched the linebackers get attacked in the passing game, and what are you going to do if they're not going to throw it your way? Somebody had a thread on the board last week. Did AJ Harris play? I think AJ led the team in snap, or led the corners in snaps, but you didn't see him because he wasn't on the screen when the ball got thrown. So some of that's good. It's not so much you don't know the long snapper's name until he messes up, but it's one of those things where I'd like to see those guys get tested, and it's just a product of the environment that they've played in this non-con. And I think it's going to be tough to throw them in there, not essentially into the fire against Oregon's receivers, but when you don't have that opportunity to rep and drill and practice and things like that, it can burn you.
Sorry, someone was asking about the save. Oh, we'll just bring it up here on the chat. P. Chris says Torrey Payne and can Torrey Payne or somebody take reps from Wheatley? No. I mean, theoretically, yes, but some of the things we've seen, there is mixing and matching more than I've seen previously from Penn State in terms of guys that play one of the safety positions playing the other. It has been more rigid in the past, and I'm talking about the free and the strong, the boundary field, however you want to label them. But Vabu Torrey, here are the things I know. Vabu Torrey has 100% only played snaps at the boundary safety going all the way back to the blue-white game. Zakee Wheatley has played 100% of his snaps at the field position. So Vabu Torrey is not going to be in the conversation to take some of those reps from Wheatley. Lamont Payne has struggled in that position and has not seen the field in that rotation. The guys who are vying for that position are Dejon Lane and Antoine Belgrave Shorter. Those are the guys that have taken snaps outside of Wheatley so far and have rotated. In week 1, it was Lane who was the starter off the reserve off the bench to give Wheatley a spell. And then Belgrave Shorter was the other guy this week. And that did interfere in some of his reps because how it worked out, the drive that Dejon Lane was playing the field safety position was one in the fourth quarter where he played 13 straight snaps. Penn State generally does not substitute its secondary mid-drive. They keep those guys in place, and then they'll swap guys out, for third down defense in the past or some other situation. So that battle, I think, is also ongoing of who's going to be the guy behind Wheatley. But those are the names. Like, there are 4 names that we're dealing with here. And then the way King Mack played, I think he deserves to get a larger piece of the conversation about playing at that strong safety position where he played and made some of those plays that we saw from him last week.
It's fun, isn't it? We were talking in August about position battles going into the first 3 weeks of the season, and now that they're not resolved 2/3 of the way through the first 3 weeks of the season, it was like, what's wrong? Here's what's happening. But those guys do need more work. It's going to come from those 4, I believe. I thought we would see more Torrey last week based on some of the stuff we saw against Nevada and some of the practice, but I think he is limited in what he can do. In certain spots, you mentioned he's only played one of the roles. Belgrave Shorter played, I think, 34 snaps against Nevada, but they switched him around and made him be versatile and play both spots. So I think that goes into it as well. And I think it's going to come from those first 4 guys. It's cutting teeth, man. That's what we're watching right now. And it's in one element, it's fun to watch. In the big picture element, it's fun to watch. Down to down, maybe not as fun. Somebody mentioned that Dejon Lane hasn't looked good. His processing has led to him playing slower, and him playing slower has led to him taking some angles that are probably not against him. I think he was in the backfield a few times, made some plays there. But just looking at what he's got, you've got a little bit of linebacker showing through, I think.
Yeah, he's a little aggressive, pulling himself out of coverage positions, and that lack of awareness, kind of moving around when he doesn't need to, has led to opportunities that the other team can't really capitalize on. And here's a good thing, because there are 4 defensive linemen in the guy's face most of the time. Does that happen later on in the year? And that's really what Penn State has to judge of trusting players in situations of it's not going to be ideal where, okay, a guy who's on a crossing route doesn't get picked up immediately. It does this pressure, which results in a throwaway, then result in a completion later. These are the things they've got to tighten up and figure out who they trust in those situations. We mentioned receiver glancingly. Are you surprised, or do you think it's necessary for them to get some of those young guys into the rotation? Because people are looking for something to elevate the receiver room, to elevate the passing attack, which hasn't been explosive, as we've talked about.
Have we?
Is that an antidote? Is that an antidote to the situation? It seems like what they're trying to do is, hey, these are the 4 guys we want to make sure that this passing game circles around, and we're going to make sure that works first. So how have you viewed the process there of those 6 guys turning into 4?
I don't think that Taseer Denmark and Kobe Howard fundamentally change what you're doing in the passing game. And I think the passing game's issues really haven't been as much on the receivers as they've been in past years. And because of that, you want to get those 3 transfers healthy. You're going to continue to rep Liam Clifford in as a run blocker, basically, and sort of go from there and go with those 4 guys that you're comfortable with. I would like to see more of those 2 on the field in situations, but I think it was a scenario just like we talked about with some other positions, is they wanted to play more of those guys against FIU. The situation did not dictate it because they weren't scoring the points that they needed to score. I think they'll have that opportunity this weekend, and I think we'll see both of those guys. But in terms of, because someone
seeing
mentioned
them with Aller, I think, is part of it too. Not just seeing them late in the game, but also seeing them as part of the first team offense. Because even in these situations, they haven't cycled in when Penn State's up with the starting unit. And I guess that's the part I'm interested in. Of Franklin talked about Kobe Howard burning his red shirt and the process that needs to happen for that to be valuable. And it sounds like even if he were to be valuable on special teams, it doesn't necessarily equate to a large role on offense. So I guess it just, that whole who are the starters, not just seeing those guys on the field, has been a bit of a rollback from what we said. If they felt like they had 6 receivers and they felt good about that depth. And we're really focusing on those 4 guys at the top.
Yeah, and youth matters. Like you've got some pop in those guys, specifically Kobe Howard. But as the guy says in the chat here, Kobe Howard caused big plays. You don't know that. Like you feel like that could potentially happen, but you haven't seen it. You don't know that. And I think that the stuff that they see from practice to practice, day to day, would really go into, this is what they do from a rotational standpoint. Like, this is what they're comfortable with. And if Howard can be that guy, or could be Jeremiah Smith, he'd be in the game. Like, that's a little bit different. So I think it's more of a comfort of the unknown, more so than anything. Like we did this with Denmark all last year, and he caught 2 or 3 passes. I think it's a situation where you don't know, or you like what you don't know, and then you see those guys, and you're like, okay, well, that didn't fundamentally change some things. It's like Nate's theory a couple of weeks ago. There's only enough snaps, like there's only enough reps to go around, and you want to get Ross ready. Like, that was an emphasis last week. I think it was pretty clear of an emphasis last week. You want to get those 3 guys on the page with Drew Aller, because that's the stuff that matters against Oregon, against Ohio State, against these Big Ten teams, is how does that passing game work with them out there? I just don't see the gap being covered by those 2 guys to make this a completely explosive offense, or to make it a completely functional offense. I think that the receivers, specifically the transfer receivers, have been fine with that. Yeah.
And also, when we're talking about the passing offense and distributing snaps to all the positions, if you're now talking about 5 receivers, and we'll just, for the fantasy, take out Liam Clifford from the conversation and insert Kobe Howard, Taseer Denmark. Now you got 5 receivers, you've got 2 tight ends minimum, and you've got 2 running backs. That is too many mouths to feed. So I think also from a overall target distribution priority, they're in a good spot right now. Devontae Ross hasn't got as much work maybe as the other top 2 receivers, but part of that was shifting the plan last week in the second half for a bunch of game flow reasons. So I guess the last thing, we're coming up to the end of the show. I want to circle back personally. Sorry, go ahead.
We got a quick circle back here. You look at the snaps that Khalil Dinkins and Luke Reynolds have played as well. That's going to impact receiver snaps. It's going to impact, it's sort of going to have a ripple effect on everyone in the passing game. I think you're pretty pleased with those 2 right now, and Andrew Rappelier as well. But I think I remember 74 snaps for Dinkins, 73 snaps for Luke Reynolds. So a lot of different personnel groupings. They've played 3 tight ends, so I think it's going to cut down on that. And also, usually when subs happen at wide receiver during the drive, it's because somebody's run deep and they tap out. That's the kind of thing we haven't really seen a ton of.
Yeah, and playing 2 tight ends a lot also then allows you to take one of those receivers off the field and not replace them with another receiver. Now that we're here to the end of the show, a couple minutes here to talk about how it happens this weekend for Penn State football. Fitz, give me your score prediction, how you think this game is going to go.
What a remarkable rundown you put together, because you put the scores for Ryan, you, and I all in there, and we all have Penn State scoring 52 points. It's amazing, because I didn't look at your I don't think your prediction was in when I put mine in. I didn't even look at Ryan's and Greg's and those things. But 52 seems to be the lucky number. 52-6 is what I have. I think they continue to work on the things that they're going to work on. I think it has the ability to be a game that where they come out and they make some mistakes, they don't get a third down or something like that, and there's frustration early. But I think that, once you get through the big, get over the hump in the first quarter or whatever it's going to be, then I think Penn State rolls.
I want to circle back to the offensive line conversation and Penn State versus the Villanova defense, because I think it's the most interesting of the matchups, because it's a pretty standard spread offense for Villanova, and Penn State's defense is designed to go ahead. You were going to say something?
Yeah. I mean, I think you should clarify. Are you saying against Villanova's defense or against Villanova's scheme? Because I think that's an important
scheme.
Yeah. That's
absolutely
what I thought you were talking about. And I think that's the important part when you're working on things like the running game is to differentiate between the players in the scheme.
Yeah. So the scheme is the most interesting aspect of this, where it's something that is going to challenge the mental side of things for the Penn State offense. The defense is largely built to stop what they're going to see this weekend. So I think we're going to see just like trying to be sharper at all those things. On the offensive side of the ball, what James Franklin, you can go check out his press conference here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel when we discussed this with him after practice. But what he was saying is essentially they can create chaos because of their alignment and the way that they are playing their style, given they don't have dominant defensive linemen, and they need to do something extra to frustrate and confuse the opponent. Confusion leads to hesitancy. Hesitancy leads to a lack of domination. So everyone in the chat that says, like, Penn State, I want Penn State to smash people, and just like, you got to be dominant. On that basic level of your first snap off the ball, of just rocking the dude in front of you, yes, I agree with you. But when it comes to a process, you want to make sure you're going to find the right guy. He's where you expect him to be, and you make that block, because if you don't do that and you just maul one dude, it's still a 4-yard gain. Right. That is where I think this is going to be a good test to see how they come out and attack this, because confusion, movement, and trying to get free guys into the backfield based on mental errors is the point of the Oregon defensive front. So I'm not saying that they run this defense, and I'm not saying that what they do today is going to directly relate to what they do against Oregon. It's the idea of making sure that post-snap, you are on your details, whatever that assignment is from this particular look. And that shows, like, for a veteran unit that's been together for a couple of years, I think that's absolutely something that they need to be able to do in this game to show the confidence to come out and say, okay, we know they're doing something we don't see often, but we're going to be able to handle it. And here's like a big run, because we are both mentally and physically dominant to what we're up against. Ryan's score here, as we get out of here, 52-7, as Fitz alluded to. Everyone put 52 points. Fitz, I was a little gun shy, because the number of times that I've said, like, yeah, almost 60 in this game, and then James Franklin's like, yeah, we're working on stuff, and they're scoring 34 points. So I went, 7 touchdowns plus a field goal. And the defense, even when they've been, working on stuff, has given up 3 points with the starters and 0 points with the starters. So I went 3. I would have gone 1.5, right, if I just averaged out the 2 games for the starters. So that's my score there.
Yeah, I think the thing that you forget, they scored 46 points against Nevada and didn't look their crisp. Now, they scored on most of their drives. I think they had a couple at the end where they didn't score. And you want those to be touchdowns instead of field goals, but still, you can pile up 46 points. I think with an FCS team coming to town, there's no real excuse for that. It is funny. I had one vision there when you were talking about lining up and destroying the guy in front of you, and coming out with that intensity and everything like that. So we just did Tavian Branch's commitment video this week, and there is one play where he blindsides the guy, a blindside like the movie Blindside, where he drives the guy off basically to the sideline, and it looks really cool. And it was like a 4-yard gain on a wide receiver screen. So like there's everything that goes into play here from an execution standpoint. Yes, you can blow your guy off your ball. You can have a wonderful rep, but if everybody's not functioning at the same time, you get a 4-yard gain on a wide receiver screen. So I think that's kind of what you're getting at here. Is the execution is the key thing. It's not yourself. It's not the opponent. It's doing your job and seeing the results of that flourish. And I think that's been the frustrating part watching Penn State this year, is that it hasn't come together from that aspect.
And we'll see if they can get it done in the one final non-conference game coming up at 3:30. I always mean to do this. I need to do this on Tuesdays because I'm still thinking about the previous game, but promoting things is as many days in advance as possible. 12:30 instead of like the last 30 seconds before the next time we talk on air. 12:30 is the tailgate show coming up outside the Bryce Jordan Center ticket office. It'll be myself and Kyle Leff of Seven Mountains Media taking you through a lot of what we talked about today and previewing what we expect from the Nittany Lions. We'll also have the availability report live here once it's published from Penn State and the Big Ten, so we can get you that game day information. And of course, you can get it at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Our guys probably have it before I get it because I'm live on air and kind of just like flying in a cockpit trying to figure out what's going on around me. But 12:30, join us for that tailgate show. And, of course, all the great stuff we do on game day, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, your place to follow along your second screen experience. And then afterwards, we have some of the best post-game that you're going to get from analysis, content, and James Franklin's press conference so you can hear the words from him directly. All that here this weekend. I'm Thomas Frank Carr for Sean Fitz. I'll talk to you then.